The state of the state.
The solution cannot be even more spending. Instead of demanding more revenue from the people, I suggest we demand more fiscal responsibility from our government.
Governor Doug Ducey describes his plans for Arizona, but are there more questions than answers?
They want good schools for their kids. So how are you going to attract a high-tech company when you're rock bottom in education spending?
This is Arizona Week. Arizona's 23rd governor took office last week and a few days ago laid out his plans for the year ahead. It's been a few days since Governor Doug Ducey gave his State of the State, first in Phoenix on Monday, then Tucson on Tuesday. A short speech with very few details.
I think when you talk about details, we're talking about not raising taxes. We're talking about tying the tax rate to inflation so that we don't have a tax increase every year. We're talking about providing flexibility for all our public education, especially those ones that are excelling, and that getting after schools that are consistently underperforming. We think there's a lot of specifics there. You'll see policies that follow on that, including this civics initiative, which we're very excited about. But you know, with the free market economy, it's not government that creates jobs. It's government that creates the environment in which jobs can happen, and you're going to see that out of the Ducey administration.
When asked about the perception that Southern Arizona takes a backseat to state government, he said this.
I focused a lot on Southern Arizona, Tucson, and Pima County during the election, and I think you can tell a lot about how someone will govern by how they campaigned. So I'm going to be spending time here. I know the issues here are unique, different, and urgent. I think the fact that we're a border state is an advantage for our economy. So I want to maximize that relationship with Mexico and our port in Nogales on the border. So whatever's happened in the past, I can't really comment on, but I'm here today and I'm going to be back often and want to focus on really growing this economy and the things that are unique to Southern Arizona.
A major talking point for the 23rd governor, education.
I'm saying where there's schools that are at capacity. I think one example here, I believe, is Rose Elementary, or schools that have wait lists. These are schools where parents have already made a decision and said, I want my child to go to that school. When we have availability or empty buildings, we want those excellent principals and superintendents and school operators to have access to those open seats so that we can allow the good schools to grow and expand.
His comments igniting a debate about the free market as it relates to public school funding.
We want parents to be able to make that decision, and in that sense, you do have that choice available. What I want to do, though, is take the state assets that are not being put to full use and allow those to go to the better operators. Now, these are not people that we're taking a risk on. These are folks that have already proven that they can do it, and they can do it at a higher level than others. We think that rising tide, so to speak, of educational excellence will help all of our children and give more choices to our parents.
Reporters pressed him to clarify charter versus public schools.
I don't see any reason to pit one public system against another. These are all our kids, and I want to see them all have the opportunity to get the best possible education. I'm going to work with people that are performing in the educational space.
Governor, in concerns talking with educators last night and this morning, your idea of reducing administrative costs to put more money in the classroom. They expressed concerns that administration also covers bus drivers, cafeteria workers, school nurses. That's all part of the educational experience. And there was a lot of concern on the ground here in Southern Arizona about that.
There are multiple school districts. We have 200 plus school districts in the state of Arizona. So this is multiple transportation systems, food service systems, custodial systems, plant maintenance systems. What I'm looking for is to find efficiencies, because every dollar that's not being spent there in terms of redundancy or duplication are dollars that can go to the classroom supporting teachers teaching. That's what I'm talking about when I'm calling on us to get our administrative costs in line.
The governor did not mention immigration in either speech, but when asked about his advice for young dreamers, he had this to say.
I want everyone to be able to access an excellent grade school and high school education. And I want to have an economy where there's not only help wanted signs out there, but where these jobs can turn into fulfilling careers. So part of that is not only a K-12 system that's improving year over year and has accountability to the taxpayer, but it's an economy that's ever growing and expanding.
A major theme in both speeches, education and how the state budget will adapt to serve the more than 200 school districts. Here's Superintendent of the Sahuarita Unified School District, Dr. Manny Valenzuela.
When you talk about administration or out-of-classroom expenses, you're often referring to things like transportation or health services or guidance counselors or librarians or things that might not generally take place every day within the four walls of any given classroom. But I think that most people would agree that those are essential elements of a quality-focused education and the delivery of high-quality service.
We've heard a lot of debate during the campaign. We've heard some allusion to it during inaugural addresses about changes to what nationally are known as the Common Core standards. Do they need to change from, again, from a superintendent, a local superintendent's point of view, do those need to change, or do we need to just leave well enough alone at this point?
You know, there's been obviously a lot of conversation about what has been known as the Common Core. I believe that as an educator, as an educational leader, a lot of us believe that they're sound, solid standards. I think if the average person sits down and reads them and looks at them, there's nothing in themselves that appears to be real controversial. They seem to be well articulated, they seem reasonable, they seem prudent. And in addition to that, in good faith, most every educator I know has been working really, really hard, doing a lot of heavy lifting to facilitate the implementation, which includes, of course, staff development, the planning of instruction, the calendaring of curriculum, and the initiation of sound delivery. Now, having said that, I would be the first to say I don't believe that the Common Core is the panacea to all that ails education, but I also would counter that by saying it's also not the pariah. I think a lot of times there's confusion or maybe misunderstanding with other important topics or individual case studies or situations that emerge that are sometimes linked to the Common Core that really are about other issues or bad examples or bad events that take place. And so in regards to the Common Core, I would be worried if we swept them under the rug or threw them over the fence or whatever, that we'd be taking steps back in terms of starting over, when really, to me, the real important thing is the working collaboratively of school communities, the legislature, the public schools, and the education community in general to really target important issues like recruitment of high quality, highly qualified professional staff, investing in high quality staff development, working with students on an individualized level to meet their personalized needs, including teaching them at their instructional levels, looking at their broad needs as individuals, engaging their families, and really doing the things that the American public school system has always done, that has made our country the great country that it is, and that hopefully will continue to propel it in a positive light going forward into the future.
One of the things the governor wants to do is take school buildings that may be closed at this point due to lack of use and turn them over to higher performing schools.
My concern about that particular issue is, and it ties into my genuine, sincere worries about some of the initiatives that we hear in the name of reform. And that is that we can, on a large scale, solve the problems of education by treating education as a market-driven commodity that with enough competition and free enterprise principles can force the school system to improve. I am a product of the public schools, and I'm grateful for the opportunity. My parents came here as immigrants, and I always valued the role that the American public school plays in the unique place that America has assumed as a world leader. And I don't think it's any coincidence that we have had historically a public school system that opens its arms to all students, provides all students with a fair, equitable opportunity. Notice it's not always equal, and I understand that, but an equitable opportunity to get a quality education and to achieve his or her dreams. I worry, for example, when we say that problems can be solved by opening empty buildings and inviting folks to come in. I think I worry about that because I think we need to look at the public schools as a public investment that and as resources. I would agree that it is sad that we have publicly funded, publicly invested resources that belong to the community that are empty, and we do need to rethink and maybe regress to reason, in my opinion, about how courses of events have led to that. But I believe that honestly, part of the reason we're in that situation is because we've followed a plan of action that has suggested that that's okay, that market forces can compete with each other, and that if some public entities lose, then that's a consequence of this whole principle and how we're trying to reform schools, as it's been discussed. So I would hope that we could come back together to the idea that let's return to reason. Let's revisit some of these principles, and let's, if there's tangible data that some of these reform initiatives have paid dividends, then we're open to having those discussions. But I think there's at least a fair amount of evidence in terms of some of these free market principles in education that they haven't always yielded the return on investment that's been put in. There have been a couple of standards, some of that are well known. One is out of Stanford in 2009. A more recent one called the Chinga study was focused just on education in Arizona. And in a nutshell, that's a whole nother interview, but in a nutshell, it really suggested once again that although some of these principles have yielded some fruitful outcomes, as a broad-based transformational reform, these measures have not been as transformational as would have been desired.
In the first full week of the legislature, state lawmakers passed a civics test bill requiring Arizona students to pass it before graduation. Here's Senate President Andy Biggs and Speaker of the House David Gowan. The two sat down for an interview on Arizona Horizons at KAET, our sister station in Phoenix.
What are you expecting from the governor's budget?
Well, I think we're going to look at it and see a balanced budget come forth. And I think it's going to be about what he's talked about in the state of the state, and that is grow the economy, grow ourselves out of this position we're in. One of the major things that we do when we're looking at the budget here, and from the House side, I know, is discussion on the deregulation side. And I think that helps our governor's vision here promote that growth, growing out of this. And if we can ask all our business owners out there, right here as I'm speaking to you, if you have troubles with regulation in some manner, shape, or form, discuss them with your local representative, or give us a call. Let us know what's harming you. Chances are, if it's harming you, it's harming somebody else. There's no silver bullet in deregulation. So you can't just say, here's a bill, it says dereg, and you've done it. You actually have to do it by piecemeal. So in that view, we have to get our business owners to contact us. They have to come forth and let us know that. And we can actually attack those pieces to help them so that they can hire more people, help them to do better for this economy. When the economy is roaring and doing well, that means my family's doing good. And I look at that introvertly,
You said a couple of things that caught my ear. You said everybody's going to have to tighten their belt, or some kind of general belt tightening. And he also talked about, he said a lot of people aren't going to necessarily be pleased with what he's going to do, but he feels that he has to make some tough decisions. So I think when you talk about general belt tightening and you talk about tough decisions, I would imagine that along with the idea of growing the economy to increase state revenues, I think you're going to be looking at trying to find efficiencies in government, which is something the governor mentioned, as well as maybe some reductions here or there, or even consolidations where you might need to consolidate to reduce the administrative overhead.
No chance whatsoever of new taxes down the pike.
No, I think right now we've promised things in the past of these tax cuts that we've already implemented. And we've promised businesses that we will help them with that. And so they have their own business plan. It's already set. So if you change their plan, many who may be even thinking of coming here, they're not going to come here. Other side, is now you've just destroyed their plan for the future on how they're going to promote their business or the hiring that they're going to do in the future. You can't do that to a business, and you can't, as my word is, you can't take your word and take it back. I think we have to get through this, and in fact, we are starting to see the economy grow, and I believe it's because we are helping in that nature.
The governor calling for an executive order to maximize dollars to the classroom. What do you think about this? And especially the argument that, again, Arizona overspends on administrative costs. We've had folks on this program saying we don't even spend the national average when it comes to administrative costs. How much is there to cut when you're scrubbing every dollar as the governor wants us, and I'm sure you want as well? How much does it cost to scrub every dollar?
I think that there's some interesting dynamics when we say let's put the money into the classroom. I agree. That's where we want it to go. If you talk to people in our constituents, they're going to say we want it to go to the classroom because we want the best opportunities, best achievement, we want the best teachers, and we want to reward good teachers, etc. But our definitions that we have probably need to be scrubbed, to use your term, just as much. So why would a teacher's aide not be considered in-class dollars? Because that's where they go. That's everything is directed for that teacher's aide salary, and if they have benefits, and most don't, but if they do, that's going into the classroom. So I think we need to look at the definitions to help us understand exactly where that funding's going.
The idea of reducing borrowing costs for charters and taking some buildings that may not be used and allow charters to expand in parts of towns that I don't know if charters are all that interested in. Anyway, as far as this idea is concerned, what do you think?
We all believe in education. And if we all believe in education for children, anybody, then shouldn't it be the best? And if we're talking about children, shouldn't it be for the parents? And that's our belief here. And any way we can do that, we need to look at those issues.
Governor Ducey released his budget for the year, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But first, we're hearing from a senior research economist at the University of Arizona Eller College of Management. Here's my interview with Dr. Alberta Charney.
The only cost-sharing measure he discussed was the hiring freeze, but he talked about 2 additional tax cuts. He's wanting to continue to implement the corporate income tax phased-in cut without postponing it or anything, so that's going to be on schedule. And he talked about indexing the income tax, which is another tax cut. So those are 2 places where revenues will be declining, so it even makes the shortfall greater.
$1 billion to most people, that sounds outrageous because we can't fathom what that looks like. But that's a big deal for a state like ours.
It's a very big deal, and I don't, you have to wonder why it's occurring, because we are in growth. We don't have a recession. We're not in recession. We've had job growth. So why do we have a shortfall? And in my opinion, we have a structural deficit, but no one else is talking about that. So
structural deficit, how would you describe that here in our state?
It means a shortfall of revenues. So you're always going to be in the situation where even in higher growth than this, we could end up with shortfalls because revenues just aren't keeping up with income growth, especially the sales tax.
How did we get here?
I think it's a combination of factors in terms of revenues. Sales taxes are shrinking as a share of income, and they've been shrinking for about 25 years now. And part of it's a national trend from services towards services from goods. Part of it is, I think, the aging of the population. They buy less taxable things. They buy more services that aren't taxable. I think part of it's the income distribution. The very wealthy tend not to spend as much of their income on taxable sales as low and middle income families. So it's a combination of a lot of different factors that have caused this continuing decline in sales tax as a share of income.
Describe these taxable services that you're talking about.
Well, taxable sales is not taxable services. Taxable sales are goods, things. So when you go to a department store, what you buy is taxable. But if you hire a service to be done, it's not taxable. If you go see an attorney or you go to a doctor, it's not taxable. So as people spend more and more on non-taxable things, the share of income that goes to sales taxes falls.
It's long been said that Arizona hasn't quite recovered from the recession a few years ago. Is that true?
That is true. Our job recovery is maybe 60 or 70% of where we were in 2007. Nationwide, we're above. Nationwide, we're about 15% above where we were at the previous peak. So the country's made up all those job losses and more, but Arizona hasn't made up all that job loss yet.
Governor Ducey says no new higher taxes yet. I will tackle this budget deficit. So how do you do it without new higher taxes?
I have no idea, and he didn't leave too many clues in that speech. He talked about a hiring freeze, but I don't think that's going to do much for $1 billion deficit. So we have yet to learn the details, and the devil is always in the details as to what's going to be cut.
As an economist, what do you think works in Arizona for the economy?
I don't think that continual tax cuts has done much for our economy. We've had continual tax cuts off and on since 1990. They've cut income tax 7 times since then. Now they're cutting corporate income taxes. And I don't see where it's done us any good. It's eroded education spending. I can remember when we were in the middle, sort of in the median on education spending. And now we're 49th or 50th. I haven't looked at the ratings lately because it's too depressing. So we're rock bottom. We raced to the bottom and we're there. I just don't know what we won.
We cut back too much.
They want good schools for their kids. So how are you going to attract a high-tech company when you're rock bottom in education spending?
You've been an economist for nearly 40 years.
Yeah.
How would you describe Arizona's economy moving forward? It's a pretty bleak picture?
Well, it's mixed. I mean, we do have some very strong high-tech sectors in the state. Our overall wage structure is very low. Now, some people would say that's a good thing. People will come for low wages. But if the low wages are because we don't have the skills to do the higher paid jobs, then that's not a good thing. Our education achievement has started to fall compared to what it was relative to the nation. It's a mixed bag, and to me, education is a key to a lot of economic development as well as quality of life and people wanting to come here. And it has been neglected for a very long time.
The Buzz now with my colleague Christopher Conover. Christopher's been crunching some numbers, $9.09 billion budget laid out by the governor.
This is what he has laid out, he being Governor Doug Ducey, for his first budget after a little more than a week in office. It is a reduction in the current fiscal year budget, but it has to be. There's nearly $1 billion projected shortfall for the upcoming fiscal year, which begins this summer.
And the cuts already starting. I think the big talking point, higher education, university systems. What are we looking at?
University system as a whole, the 3 state universities taking about a $75 million cut. To accomplish that, he's going to break it down based on enrollment at each of the universities. Now, the universities have taken cuts for the last about 6 years to the tune of about $400 million. Now, some of that has been made up with tuition increases. It'll be interesting to see what the Board of Regents and the universities, each campus, how they handle those cuts.
And community college is also taking a cut this time.
Community college is also taking a cut almost to the tune of $9 million. Ducey said in the release of his budget that this is what he wants to see the universities do. Look outside for other funding, stabilize what the state is giving them, and look to the federal government grants, private donors, whatever it takes. But he's going to be reducing the state funding to the universities.
And we're talking fiscal year 2016, which starts in July.
Exactly, and can be confusing to some people because the governor's budget recommendation actually dealt with 2 budgets. The budget that is currently going on, he also has to reduce, the one we're operating under now, because there is a shortfall now, which he makes up with a series of cuts, including a hiring freeze, and then he also goes into the rainy day fund, as it's called, to make up the difference for the rest of this year. But the university cuts, yes, those are for the upcoming fiscal year.
Okay, we heard a lot about K through 12 funding in his State of the State. What numbers did we come to?
The K-12 funding, he increases K-12 funding to the tune of about $160 million. Now that funding is the inflation index that's been talked so much about in the lawsuit, the past inflation. But he does specify that money must go to the classroom. At the same time that he increased K-12 funding to the classroom by $160 million, he reduced K-12 funding by about 5% to administration.
All right, another number that caught us off guard, of course, was for the Department of Corrections, increase $5.3 million for beds.
He's expecting, the state is expecting an increase in the need for beds, especially in medium security men's facilities. So he's told the Department of Corrections put out a request for proposals to get those beds handled. Most likely those won't be built. That will probably be leased out through a private prison.
Okay, also Medicaid, a topic. Doctors may be taking a cut.
Doctors are taking a cut. They're taking a cut in the current fiscal year. That's part of the way he's solving the problem. 3% cut to providers. Those are the doctors and hospitals that treat Medicaid patients, how much they get paid. That 3% cut helps solve part of the budget shortfall for the current fiscal year, and the next fiscal year, same 3% cut. It'll be interesting to see their reactions. Doctors often complain about Medicare federal cuts. Now they're getting a Medicaid cut also.
And an increase for the Department of Child Safety, which of course was the big talking point out of last administration.
There's an increase. It's not a big increase, but this is a new agency anyway. But there's money in the budget for about 8 more investigators. It's 6 more actual field investigators and then 2 assistants, if you will, to help them deal with things once they get back.
Okay, also the hiring freeze that he mentioned in the State of the State, we did get some numbers in. 2.4 projected to save $2.4 million for this year, and then fiscal year 2016, $18.3 million.
The hiring freeze goes on. We're not going to grow state government is what he said, and we're not hiring any more people. We're shrinking the bureaucracy, in his words.
Okay, and then that rainy day fund, we're pulling approximately $125 million?
We are, but we'll still have over $300 million left in the rainy day fund if there are any problems that need to be dealt with.
All right, Christopher Conover, a lot of information to get through. Thank you for your analysis. And that's our program. Thank you so much for joining us. For all of us at Arizona Public Media, I'm Lorraine Rivera.